I constantly see Ashes of Creation compared to World of Warcraft. Asmongold in his latest reaction to the Cleric livestream, for instance, mentions World of Warcraft 10 times in his 1-hour react, and that is probably on the low end for him. And I get why, that is the game he has played the most, and the MMO that most people have played the most. But often comparisons between Ashes and WoW simply do not work that well. The reason is Ashes is considerably different from WoW. When comparing Ashes to WoW, it is not just Asmongold that does it. I get comments all the time from people that clearly do not understand the basics of what Ashes is. Ashes is not a theme park MMO, it is a sandpark MMO. And to this date, there really is only one other major sandpark MMO to compare Ashes to, and that is ARCHAGE. I have already done the comparison between Ashes and WoW before. This video is more about comparing Ashes to the game it is truly most inspired by. What I think historically has made MMOs unique is the wide variety that at least used to exist in the MMO landscape before we were flooded with theme park WoW clones. Maybe you've seen the political compass before. A lot of people in the US narrow their focus to the x-axis of this chart, when the reality is the variation in ideologies is much deeper than that. That is kind of how MMOs have been lately, stuck on one small part of the chart. Or maybe you've seen the high crazy matrix before. To me, MMOs like WoW have been hanging out somewhere in the no-go zone with maybe some aspects in the fun zone for a long time. Maybe at one point they were in the date or the wife zone, but I can't put them there anymore, at least not for me. Ashes, I think, could cover a wider area on this chart, but for some it might be the danger zone where girls named Tiffany reside, or for others it might be the wife zone or even the unicorn zone. And of course we can't forget the fuck around and find out chart. To me, MMOs have been fucking around at about a 3 for a long time, with no big publishers willing to take any risks and try anything new. And therefore players have been finding out at about a 3 for a long time that all these MMOs are essentially the same. Ashes, I think, is fucking around at around an 8 to 10 level, and we're gonna find out if that level of fucking around will create a great MMO or not. In reality, you could make a chart like the political compass chart that compares MMOs to each other. Most modern MMOs like WoW cover a small part of this chart, but Ashes is covering a larger area of this chart. So by now, after showing 4 different charts, I think I've made a pretty good impression that this MMO is quite a bit different from a lot of the MMOs that maybe you've played in the past. Either way you look at it, MMOs, when compared to other genres, have had historically a wide breadth in terms of the differences between them. I think this difference is more pronounced in the MMO genre than it is in most other gaming genres. The problem is we haven't seen that variety in the MMO era with the barrage of WoW clones we continue to be fed. ARCHAGE is one MMO that actually did try to be different, and I know some of you are going to say immediately that ARCHAGE failed, which at this point is definitely true. Both versions of ARCHAGE have really small populations at this point, but that is not how it started for ARCHAGE, not at all in fact. In fact, ARCHAGE had one of the largest launches in MMO history. However, the launch was pretty bad. Tryon drastically underestimated how many players they would have and just didn't have the server capacity to handle the number of players. And the game was quickly plagued by many game-breaking bugs, bots, and exploits. A lot of MMOs have these same issues at launch, but there is a certain level of these that can be too much for the developer to overcome, and is just unacceptable for the player base. And with ARCHAGE, that definitely contributed to its downfall. But most of you are probably aware of the most often cited reason for ARCHAGE's demise, and that is the pay-to-win that was added in large amounts. There are certainly different levels of pay-to-win, but ARCHAGE at one point was one of the worst offenders we have ever seen in the genre, in my opinion. The labor system tied deeply into the pay-to-win, and no matter how hard they tried to remove pay-to-win in the Unchained version, the labor system made it hard to truly remove pay-to-win. In essence, labor is just flawed, and it needs to be removed if you want to have any chance of having a good game. There are other reasons for the demise of ARCHAGE, but those are the main ones. I also think that the infinite gear score grind that leaves players behind, that do not either swipe or play every single day, is a problem, and one that is very common with many Korean MMOs. And while ARCHAGE had some great features, it was a crazy, ambitious, and complex MMO for its time. Some of the features felt a bit half-baked as a result. So does Ashes address the failings of ARCHAGE to the point that it could be a true spiritual successor and see real sustained success, and not just be yet another MMO flash in the pan? Well, we don't know for sure yet on a lot of these things because everything with Ashes is still on paper. but we do know that Ashes will not have pay to win, and it will not have a labor system. These two things alone drastically improve upon the ARCHAGE formula. We know they're committed to game security and having very long testing periods to ensure game-breaking bugs are hopefully addressed before launch. But this is always a tricky one because exploiters will often hold on to any exploits they find to abuse them at the launch of the game. Some bugs and possibly even some exploits will make it into the launch, as they do in almost every single MMO launch. But definitely there needs to be less exploits and bugs than ARCHAGE or New World had. Server capacity at launch is always tricky because if you create too many servers for the launch rush, that creates issues down the line when you have to merge servers, especially with server merges being very convoluted with the node system in Ashes. So we don't know yet on this, but hopefully this part goes smoothly as well. All that being said, ARCHAGE had some incredible features. Probably the greatest feature of ARCHAGE was the naval systems. Naval PvP and PvE was top notch and something no other MMO to this day has even come close to replicating. And Ashes is taking those naval systems, and at least on paper, they seem to be improving them. ARCHAGE did not have a Mariner skill talent tree like Ashes is looking to have. There's the concept of Mariner classes in Ashes, in which players will increase their ability to pilot ships, repair ships, use ship weapons, and a whole lot more. Another improvement is that while ARCHAGE had a wide variety of ships, Ashes also has a wide variety of ships, but they are modular in design and can be customized and upgraded to give players more freedom in how they design their ships. Another incredible feature of ARCHAGE was the land ownership and housing systems. Not that many MMOs, at least not many AAA MMOs, allow you to own a real piece of land in the open world. This isn't a house that you own that 50 other people also own like in New World. This is your piece of land all to yourself, which is really cool, but it had some issues. The biggest issue was the land rush being first come first serve and players being able to own multiple pieces of land. Exploits to place down your plot faster than others was a thing, and some areas of the world were much more valuable than other areas. Does Ashes improve upon the land rush from ARCHAGE? I think it does, because with the freeholds we know that it is a bidding system and not first come first serve. This eliminates the rush and the exploits that could happen. We also know that land ownership is limited. Only one freehold can be owned by each account across all servers. Static and node housing and apartments are limited to one character on your account per server. This in theory could eliminate the land barons that were present in ARCHAGE. Another great feature of ARCHAGE were the castles and the castle sieges. However, these sieges were 50 versus 50 in ARCHAGE, with Ashes intending to make them 250 versus 250 and potentially even as much as 500 versus 500. This alone is much more interesting, but on top of that, each of the 5 castles affects 1/5 of the world and provides a ton of benefits to the owning guild. And there are weekly events to level up the 3 castle nodes, so it is not just about the once a month castle siege, there's a lot more to it. Finally, a 4th incredible feature from ARCHAGE was the trade pack system. Ashes has the caravan system, and to me, again, this looks to be a huge improvement. The gold reward from trade pack runs was generated by the game, but in Ashes the reward is tied into the player driven economy. A big difference between Ashes and ARCHAGE, and really most MMOs for that matter, is that materials cannot be fast traveled. In fact, fast travel is severely limited in Ashes in general, with the only known fast travel at this point being the scientific metropolis node superpower and with the family summon systems. ARCHAGE on the other hand actually had quite a bit of fast travel, so this is one really big difference. So with caravans, players are moving materials from one area of potential surplus to an area of need in order to facilitate the artisan professions in the crafting and processing trees, or to help with the construction of node buildings. The reward for running these caravans might be in the form of gold by players that need these materials, or it might be in the form of items that are crafted with these materials. Either way, the reward is from the player-driven economy and not generated by the game. Because the best gear comes from crafters, this makes the caravans much more interesting than the trade pack system in ARCHAGE. So all in all, Ashes, I think, on paper addresses most of the issues of ARCHAGE while improving the incredible features that it had. There are a lot more similarities and a few more differences I could go over, but I wanted to hit the highlights. Even without the hype, I've always felt that a true spiritual successor to ARCHAGE could be a massive hit. Remember, it's not often the first of anything that becomes the success. WoW was not the first theme park MMO. Several came before it. ARCHAGE was, however, the first true AAA sandpark MMO. There were a lot of mistakes made and lessons learned from ARCHAGE. ARCHAGE Unchained might technically be the second sandpark we ever saw, but that is debatable because it was just a relaunch of the first ARCHAGE. ARCHAGE 2, it seems, has a decent chance to be the next iteration of this sandpark idea to actually launch, but the question is, does anyone trust Cacao to not screw it up again? Probably not many do. Ashes might launch after ARCHAGE 2, which if Cacao does mess it up, Ashes will have another chance to learn from their mistakes. Or ARCHAGE 2 might succeed, which is a big if, and then Ashes will really have to make sure they do everything right at launch. That is an unlikely outcome, but the one that would be best for us as gamers because the MMO space needs more competition, as that is good for any genre. I've also heard some people say that sandbox MMOs never work, PvP MMOs never work, and sandpark MMOs never work. I think when looking at sandbox MMOs, we haven't seen very many real attempts. Most of the sandbox MMOs we have seen were not true AAA quality in terms of funding and polish. So the sample size is quite small in terms of legitimate attempts. And for sandpark MMOs, the sample size is literally 1, not nearly enough to be even remotely statistically significant. So to say that sandpark MMOs always fail, while technically that is a true statement, it is not a statement that is backed by a rigorous statistical analysis of the facts. And I would make the same statement regarding those that say PvP MMOs always fail. Again, we haven't seen a lot of legitimate attempts. We have a lot of low-budget indie MMOs, but not a lot of well-funded projects to use as evidence. The big publishers have all been afraid to try new things in the MMO space. Instead, they have funded what they deemed safe, and that is basically WoW clones over and over again. I'm extremely glad to be around for this new era, as we're about to see some new variety in the MMO genre, which, in my opinion, is a great thing. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video.